Hey, welcome everyone. I'm Maria from Canadian Pine Pollen, and thanks for coming to our community conversation today. We will be focusing on the lion's mane tincture. And if you're watching this recording, feel free to reach out on social media or to our website with any questions. And anyone who's on the call today, this is an open conversation, really casual. So please share any questions that you have. We have Dr. Saeid and Burgess here from Canadian Pine Pollen, and they will be hosting this conversation. So welcome, Saeid and Burgess.
Hi.
Hey, thanks so much. Um, yeah, welcome and thanks so much again, Maria, for setting this up. Like you said, we were gonna, when I saw your list of, topics to talk about, lion's mane tincture, and then setting intentions for connections. I actually jumped on the computer and just do my thing with research when I do research to do a deep dive into pine pollen, into lion's mane. We've been thinking so much pine pollen, John, that it's just like pine pollen, right? So did a deep dive into, hey, John, welcome. So yeah, did a deep dive into lion's mane to see what's the science behind it. And I was trying to connect it with the intention. And it's amazing when you look at the history of something, it just gives you so much insight. So I'm going to bring in that idea of intention, but um, it's going to be more like, what is the intention of the scientific community a lot of times when they do into science. They really miss the big point. Like, they've started these communities as a space for teaching and trying to help understand how we can improve our health and be more preventative. But when you look at the science world, it always goes towards like, what is the intervention? When things go wrong down the hill, how do we actually heal it there? So anyways, back to lion's mane. Um, so the first recorded history in terms of written knowledge of it goes to Chinese medicine. When I researched to see if there is any Aboriginal use, there isn't any references in the sources that I could find. In TCM, in traditional Chinese medicine, the first recorded elements come into play around 600 after AC, AD, sorry, and it's known as a longevity, chi supporting, and memory enhancing mushroom. That's the traditional Chinese medicine use. The Japanese used it more often, in fact, in their culinary recipes and in their medicine. And the first indications of its activity goes back to the early 1990s, where they did a couple of research on cells and realized that it actually helps grow nerve cells by triggering brain drive neurotropic factors, BDNF. That's where the research came in. And then there was one first clinical trial. So it was a double-blind placebo study tried on human trials that came into play in the 2000s. And that was done in Japan. That was an interesting trial. They looked at cognitive function with a placebo versus lion's mane. And the group that was on lion's mane started having increased cognitive function. So that was, that was kind of like the excitement around lion's mane. It's in, when you look at the herb itself, Hericium, the Latin name for it, it kind of resembles the brain, right? It's white. It's got these dendron-like extensions, white extensions. It looks like nerve cells. So it's one of those herbs that mimics the doctrine of signature. But what was really interesting to me was before there was research into it, before they knew what are the molecules, what does it do in the brain, what does it do on the brain of animals, what does it do in the cell, it was the monks, it was, the Chinese monks that figured out and recorded that this herb is good for nourishing qi energy, for helping the shen, which is the mind, and it's a longevity herb. So how did they come up with that? The idea of this, the intention of sitting down and meditating with the herb and trying to understand what it does for you, is one of the principles of plant medicine, right? Like you spend enough time with the plant, and if you can in tune to your feelings about the plant, that intuition is going to guide you into what it can be used. So those are a few things that were interesting. But another layer, so this idea of intention and how do you use that? So the science comes out that lion's mane is good for brain and memory. It's good for processes of things like Alzheimer's, dementia, or even stroke, ischemic stroke, which kind of mimics the underlying aspects of Alzheimer's and dementia. So the research comes out on that, and then the next step, the big money, the big pharma takes in terms of researching, or the government is not that, oh, here we have a herb or a mushroom that's culinary that can slow down the aging process of the cognitive brain. So let's invest into cultivating that. Let's invest into educating people about it. Let's make it a culinary cultural thing to have lion's mane as food once in a while, at least in our diet, to help this, right? That's not where the money goes. The money then goes into what is that active ingredient? What is that molecule that is doing this? So the molecule that's doing this, it's not the beta glucans, which mushrooms are known for. It's not the polysaccharides, which mushrooms are known for their immune activity, but it's a molecule. It's a triterpene, which it's a terpene molecule. It's a very volatile molecule that is responsible for all these activities. So then the next step goes towards, can we synthesize something that is looking like that, but we can label it and patent it and make it a little bit maybe more stronger to actually see impact in a dire case of Alzheimer's or dementia or stroke, like the end stage of disease. Let's see if we can find a solution for that, a patented solution for that, so we can capitalize on it, right? But you got to move back 10, 20, 30, 40 years before that and say, okay, hey, here is a mushroom that I can eat or I can consume that can prevent a bunch of things that will lead into that. So that's really interesting about lion's mane. Lion's mane has a really unique position in the world of cognitive function, and the fact that it can regenerate nervous system in the aging process, where all of that process of regeneration slows down, makes it super cool.
So I was curious about the tincture. Like, why would someone choose tincture over an extract or a capsule form when they're taking it? Or food? Like, how is it different as far as potency?
Yeah, so the idea of potency, it depends on what you consider potency. If you're going to go, what's the definition of potency? In a pharmacological standpoint, potency means how much of an active ingredient there is in your final product. So you can get a capsule that is a 10-time volume of mushroom extracted and concentrated, dehydrated, so made into tincture, into liquid, then dehydrated, then pulverized and mixed with another substance and made into a capsule, right? So you can have a 10x capsule of lion's mane, and you would say that is 10 times as potent as having the mushroom and consuming and eating it. There is the question of what happens in your body that also plays into the potency, because how do you take that active ingredient that you took and metabolize it and activate it in your liver? Like, how did you consume that? And did it go through your digestive system through the first pass effect, get into your liver, get into your circulation? And how much of it was destroyed in the process because your liver wasn't working well, or how much of that active ingredient got destroyed in the process of man-made process of concentrating it, dehydrating it, exposing it to heat, then pulverizing it and grinding it. That often gets missed out on the idea of potency. Potency in a capsule is not this potency in your body, the way it acts in your body. So this is where the idea of tinctures come in. Tinctures tend to be the purest. It's the first step of extraction. Like, if you want to make a capsule or a tablet, you have to actually make a tincture first. Oftentimes that tincture is done in mostly alcohol, or sometimes in a decoction is done in mostly water. But then that tincture or decoction becomes dehydrated, concentrated. We know this with food, like when you concentrate anything, it just, the concentrated orange juice is not orange juice. Concentrated anything is not that same thing. Concentrated pomegranate juice is not as potent as pomegranates, right? But it's a way of preserving. It's a way of conserving. So that's where, how do you define potency? Will tell you whether a tincture is more potent than a capsule that's 10 times extracted. If you define potency as an active ingredient, typically capsules and tablets tend to be higher concentration. In the market, you would find capsules that are basically ground up lion's mane, Hericium. So you look at the fine print, it will tell you Hericium ericeus, which is the Latin name for lion's mane, and in front of it, it would tell you 1,000 milligrams. So that basically means your capsule has 1 gram of lion's mane dehydrated. But if the fine ingredient says Hericium a 1-4 extract, 200 milligram, then you would say, okay, out of the 200 milligram, one part of it is the lion's mane. Sorry, one part of it is lime and 4 times is the filler. If it reversed the number and says a 4-1, you would say it's like 4 times lion's mane to every gram of the capsule you're getting. When it comes to our tinctures, we make our tinctures in a 1-4 ratio. So there's about a quarter of the volume of the tincture you take, equivalent of extracted lion's mane. Which makes it more potent than a lot of the tinctures out there. Most typical way of doing tinctures is a 1-5. So it's 200 milligram of active ingredient per ml of the solution. Whereas our tincture has 50 milligram more, 250 milligrams. So it's 25% more concentrated, more potent than a typical tincture. And the beauty of the tincture is that it doesn't really meet the first pass effect. So the dose you're taking is exactly what you take. When you take 250 milligram of a tincture dose, that absorbs through the buccal veins. So you get a lot more delivery and you bypass what the liver is going to do to it. Because the liver is going to probably gulp it up mostly for itself, because all those polysaccharides, all those terpenes, a lot of those have biological activity. So why would it, and your liver is typically the most impacted, most diseased, distorted organ because of all the chemical exposure. So a lot of the oral capsules and tablets gets to the liver and it takes that mostly to itself before it's sending it to the rest of the system. So a tincture dose typically is considered one of the best ways to actually get the medicinal ingredient into your system. But if you want to control, just as going back to the lion's mane and the idea of the active ingredient, which is the triterpene, ericin, they call it, after the name itself. So if you go after the active ingredient and you want to do chemical reactions and whatnot, then you look at, obviously, how much of that milligram of that active ingredient is in there. A lot of this products out there, they don't have standardization for lion's mane in particular. So if you think about ginkgo biloba, for example, ginkgosides are the active ingredients. A lot of the products you see that are tablets, they will say it's been standardized to that much of ginkgosides. If you look at other mushrooms, they will standardize it to the beta glucans or the polysaccharides and tell you there's that percentage. But lion's mane, the active ingredient for the brain and the cognitive aspect and regeneration of the active, the triterpene amount, we don't still know how much of it is impactful, and are there other ericins in there? Are there, like right now they talk about ericin A, which is the one that has brain drive neurotropic factor, helps brain grow. But are there other ericins? Is there ericin B, C, D? Probably there are a lot of triterpenes in there. So that's potency and tinctures. I don't know if I went off topic on that, but tinctures are your first step before anything else is made, before a capsule is made, before, you know, there's more processing goes in that. And the less processed the product is, obviously it maintains the energy of that original substance the best.
And I think it's important to also mention that we use the fruiting body only.
Yeah.
Burgess, do you want to talk about how you make the lion's mane? I thought it was kind of cool when I saw you working with it.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple process. I mean, the product sits in alcohol for a period of time. Actually, well, what we do is we get the lion's mane fresh and we press the lion's mane. So all the liquid from the lion's mane, like a juice, it gets separated from the fruiting body. So it's a way for us to dry it, but instead of all of that moisture from the mushroom going into the drying process, we're actually captivating a lot of that, you know, really cool liquid that's coming from the product, and it's not getting dispersed into the environment. And then from that point on, what we do is we usually, the alcohol extraction has to sit for a certain amount of time before you combine everything back together again in the end. So we freeze the liquid that comes from the actual original liquid from the mushroom. And then the alcohol and the mushroom is combined together, and it'll sit for about a month to get a good extraction of all those compounds. And then it'll go into the process of pressing the alcohol from it, and then adding that, putting that aside, and then basically making a tea using the ultrasonic rods to break down the cellular wall of the rest of the fruiting body that was left over from the extraction with the alcohol. And from that process, it goes down, sits in there for about 24 hours, and then we go to the process of condensing that. So we filter that out, and then the fruiting body of the lion's mane at that point is not very saturated with many nutrients at that point. It's just fibrous material. And then it's the job of taking all that liquid we were making tea with, you know, the leftover fruiting body, and it gets condensed down to super concentrated liquid that meets the ratios of the amount of alcohol that we extracted. And that liquid that we extracted from the mushrooms at the beginning, the liquid that we froze, that gets added into the second part when we condense everything down. So all that liquid gets combined together at the end, and that's the tincture we get. So it's a simple process, very clean. We're using the whole fruiting body. We're trying to keep things as simple as possible. And again, yeah, like Saeid mentioned, I really feel like it's important to keep those steps simple, because you want as much energetic properties from the original source of the product to get to the end consumer, which is basically not interfering too much with the natural process of it, and just keeping it as natural as possible.
Yeah, one of the cool things about the lion's mane compared to other mushrooms is that it has a much higher water content to pulp to water content. So it's about 11.5 times water. The rest is the stuff. So when you get it first, for making tinctures, you have two steps. Some tinctures need you have to dry the product just because of some of the molecules in the plants and whatnot. Some tinctures can be made from straight fresh stuff. In the case of lion's mane, that's the case. So when we actually juice that, as a way of dehydration. That juice, what Burgess was trying to say, is goes back to the last step and gets dehydrated and added to the final tincture. So whatever might be in that liquid, we try to actually keep it in. So you get a full spectrum of everything. And then you're skipping the step of drying the mushroom, which, you know, leaving it in heat, letting it dry is going to, because of time and because of the exposure, is going to destroy some of the active ingredients in there. Typically, that's what happens. You know, a dry herb is not as potent as a fresh herb. So in lion's mane, we have that opportunity to start from fresh, which is cool.
Yeah.
And that freshness, I think, plays into the taste and the aroma of our tincture, because you lose a lot of those. There's not a whole lot of aromatic herbs, but there's in terms of concentration, but there's a lot in numbers. There's 77 different aromatic herbs in lion's mane. It doesn't have much of a smell, but the process of drying, and if you're doing a decoction straight up with heat, you're going to lose a lot of that to the environment. So you can serve all of that in.
Yeah, it'll have a distinct type of characteristics that you're going to be able to tell that it's absolutely lion's mane. If you're familiar with the product, for sure.
Just curious, has anyone here used lion's mane in food? A lion's mane steak?
Well, since we've been making it, yeah, I've cooked it up a couple times, and it's, yeah, I think it's fantastic. It's really nice. It's like, it's heavy, it's dense. It's just about like a meat replacement. Absolutely.
Anyone else?
When I was doing the photo shoot with the fresh lion's mane, it was so beautiful. And I kind of like tore it up to do some photos. And then I'm like, oh, it's shredding really nicely, almost like a chicken-like texture. And so it kind of looked like a bowl of pulled pork. And then I tried to saute it, but it was really, really like quite wet. So it was a little slimy, but I did try with some others is to press it. And I haven't made it yet, but I tried to extract the water. But I think it would be really good vegan, like how people make tacos and they marinate it. I think that it would be a good taco replacement.
Yeah. It is very like meaty. It's very fibrous, like you're saying. It's like the fibers. Now you can see in the outside picture of the lion's mane, so like all the fibers running through it, right? So inside is like that too. It's many, many fibers. And when you cook it, it's definitely like steak. I would say, you know, if you could, texture-wise, it's very close and a little bit more chewy, to be honest. You know, you have to work at it, but it has that like that density to it, that oomph to it, you know, which makes sense why in Chinese medicine they would say it's used for.
Yeah, it's like a king oyster mushroom in a way in texture.
Yeah.
So if you like those, like I really like those mushrooms a lot. So yeah, I noticed there was a lot of similarities between the density between the king oyster. Obviously the taste would be a little bit different, but yeah, as for texture wise, I think they're very similar. Yeah, I really like, you know, getting back to the idea of like really understanding your dosage by how you feel, and like, you know, getting them, you know, like really be mindful when you're supplementing with the product, and, you know, listening to your body. And I know that's some things we tell a lot of our customers, like, what is a perfect dose? Well, the perfect dose is different for every individual. So it really depends on, you know, the state of your health, your body, how sensitive you are and whatnot. But, you know, John and I, Saeid, and I think even Maria might have been on the call just before we came, was just, you know, just becoming mindful of when you're taking a product and really understanding the connection that that product is having with your body. So a lot of times with all of our products, we give recommended dosages. But, you know, those are baselines for you to work upon. And I think that having these baselines, I always say that the minimal effective dose is generally what you'd want to achieve. If you can get the most out of the product with a minimal dose, you're going to get more value out of the product. But in order to achieve that, you really got to understand, like, and feel and understand how that product is working with you and if it's giving you a good energy and how well it's reacting with your body. And, sometimes you need more depending on your mood, depending on your physical activity, depending on the season and whatnot. So, if you feel like you need a little bit more or a little bit less, like that's something that your body can tell you. I'm sure there's more holistic ways of approaching it, perhaps from, I mean, generally that's how I personally like to take it. I feel like there's times when I probably don't need to take it. So those times I take less.
How do you take it, Burgess?
Lion's mane? Or
Yeah,
pine pollen?
lion's mane.
Lion's mane. Lion's mane, yeah. I like to take it in the mornings most often. But I like to take one thing at a time. So I know it's probably not a bad idea to take maybe a couple things at the same time. But if I'm supplementing with one particular item, I like to kind of give it I'd like to give it all my attention in a way. So I mean, if I'm supplementing with, let's say, lion's mane, I'll give it the week for sure. And I'll supplement with it and kind of avoid taking too many other supplements to get a good idea with it, get a good relationship with it. And then, just depending off that week, whether I feel like continuing with it is a good idea, I'll continue with it or I'll go on to something else. But I mean, there's a lot of things you can take. And I think it's a good idea to supplementing, just getting back to what Saeid was mentioning too. It's never a good idea to be in the state of chronic illness before you start supplementing with these things. Like the whole idea of these supplements is to maintain a healthy lifestyle. And if you can avoid being in that state of emergency where your body's basically got its back against the wall and doing everything to just maintain, that's not an ideal situation. Like the idea of compounding interest of taking these products consistently over a long period of time will have such beneficial effects for you over a long period of time. It doesn't matter how much you take and how much potency you take at a critical time that you need it. It will never compare to the fact if you're taking it consistently over a long period of time and taking just a little bit of it opposed to larger amounts. So, I really feel like that's really like the main thing is the healthy lifestyle. John was talking about breath work, like, that's such a fantastic practice. And like, just to get your mind centered. And then you got a better idea of how you relate with these products as well at the same time. Like it all goes hand in hand. So, being active, having the breath work practice, taking these products that are really good for you and affecting you in different ways, figure out what's best for you, what works best with your, like I said, the time of your life that you need them or whatnot, and just really go from there.
Thanks, Burgess.
Yeah, I can I add something to that?
Yeah,
I
please.
think it goes back to Maria, the whole idea of like setting intentions, right? A lot of times when we look at the disease and health spectrum, you get into disease and then your intention becomes, I want to heal. It's 1,000 things when you don't have it. It's this disease or that disease, but it's only health when you have it. So the intention being on health can guide you in your decision making. If you have an intention on health when you're in your 30s and 40s and 50s, right? Let's say in your 40s, just using myself as an example, with mushrooms, the intent there is to prevent a lot of potential degenerative diseases, but mainly cancer. It's in the plethora of things out there for cancer. Mushrooms they have a historical track record for helping in that front. So if you're taking a substance, and they all do that, whether it's the white button mushrooms that you buy in groceries or portobello, or it's to the other spectrum of how much impact on cancer there is with turkey tail. If you think lion's mane, because it has polysaccharides, it has beta glucans, it does have that impact on cancer. So you got to prevent from just the 7 or 8 people that we are here, likely 2 of us, or if not 3 of us, half of us is going to deal with cancer in their lifetime. That's the stat out there, right? We can either be a statistic, or we can say, okay, that is the reality of my next 20 years. How do I prevent that now, and how do I work? What is my intent in that? And health is wealth. You know, if you don't have health, you can't enjoy your family. You can't enjoy, you know, your acquisitions. You can't enjoy even your glass of water. It's really simple as that. So when I start something, I always start one at a time. Even with patients, you know, I try to be minimalist. Try to find out what's the least number of things they need at that moment. Work mostly with the lifestyle, with the foundations of the health. But once I've figured out that it sits well with me, then I definitely mix them up. So since we went into the mushroom production, I've gone through probably 2 bottles each of all 4 mushrooms. Lion's mane, I typically mix them up. I don't, at this point, you know, hopefully we'll have a mixed mushroom, because that's how mushrooms have been used in general. It's typically, you know, in protocols, you get 5 or 6 mushrooms specific to the patient's need, and then you mix them up and use them all as that, because they all have some synergy with each other, but each one of them has its own niche. And lion's mane, definitely the cognitive. Turkey tail has some cognitive, chaga has some cognitive, but lion's mane trumps those other 2. In the same sense, turkey tail and chaga trump lion's mane in the antioxidant effect and anti-cancer effect, and chaga trumps the both of them in antioxidant activity. Whereas, you know, say reishi has cognitive, but also like relaxation and mindfulness activity as well. So imagine if you're taking all of them preventatively.
Yeah. No, I was going to mention that too. Like, yeah, they all have their benefits. So yeah, having them, supplementing with all of them, in however you like to do it, is always a great idea, just to widen the spectrum of benefits that you're going to achieve from having them. You know, whether that's taking one a day or all at the same time, whatever works best for you. But yeah, definitely experimenting with them and using more than one type of single source mushroom is always a great idea, just to get, you know, maximum benefit from you know, fungus. The mushrooms, there's so many different types. You know, it's like we can look at all the different types of animals in the world. You know, we can kind of compare that to the whole different types of fungus in the world. There's so many different variations and types that have individual benefits and skills, and you know,
You definitely make sure you're cooking with them at least like a few times a week too.
Yeah.
You know, it's just the knowledge of how impactful they are. Not just lion's mane, just mushrooms. That's that.
Yeah.
The whole umbrella thing. Get it in early and get it in as much as you can.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Saeid and Burgess. And before we go into opening it up for questions, the lion's mane is the mushroom tincture that we've been talking about today. On our website, we do have a collection of 4. Let's see if I can line them up here for you. Which is kind of the best way to buy them, because they are, oh no, I can't do that. Let me see if I can hold them up for you. Work my magic. Whoop. There we go.
There you go.
Turkey tail, lion's mane, reishi, and chaga. There's a much better example on our website or Instagram. But if you buy them in a collection of 4, they are discounted, and we will be offering a discount code today for anyone who wants to purchase. So the discount code will save you 20% on the lion's mane. So use LION20, and if you have any questions, you can email me and I can give that to you as well. And you can use that on the set of 4 as well if you'd like. So I will open it up for questions. Does anyone have questions for Dr. Saeid or Burgess?
I have a question. I take the pine pollen tincture like 2 milliliters or 3 milliliters per day, Monday through Friday. And I've recently, since the last podcast was on, I've been taking some of the pine pollen. should I just stick to taking the pine pollen Monday through Friday as well?
I would personally, yeah, give yourself a total break from it. I like to supplement with a pollen tincture in the morning, afternoon, and then if you want to do another dose, let's say you're doing 3 doses, you can do up to 4 doses a day. I would do the powder later in the day. I find that a lot of people that take the tincture in the morning, they say, well, if they take it later in the day, they find that they have a hard time maybe sleeping. So that's the way I personally do it. But again, totally up to you. I think it's really good to take that 2-day break from it and just in general. So just to give your body a little bit of, build up your enzymes in your body to be able to digest it 100%, just get yourself back to a baseline and then, get back onto it, just get the most effects of the product.
Yeah, giving that signal to your body and giving it a little bit of time to process and learn from it. A lot of things that are adaptogens, which pine pollen is, it helps you adapt to stress, whether that's physical stress, whether that's mental stress, or whether it's the stress that comes from the process of aging or chemical exposure, right? It's all stress as far as the body is concerned. If you're taking it constantly, you're definitely going to get too used to it. So the 2-day break is a key thing. And if you're alternating the powder with the tincture, go back to this idea of find what's the minimal dose for you, right? Is it taking the tincture in the morning, the pollen at night? Is it taking the tincture twice, the pollen once? Is it, or do you get maximal effects from just taking the tincture, and how much extra impact you're getting from the combination? So just check in with your own body and see if that's right for you. But definitely you can go up to 4 times a day. That's the anything more than that, if you're doing 4 times a day and your body's not getting the signal, there's other things that are missing.
Yeah, I usually just take 2 to 3 milliliters of the tincture per day, and then like a half a teaspoon of the pine pollen once in a while.
Perfect.
Yeah.
John, what are the benefits that you're seeing when you're using the pine pollen products?
Oh, it's given me such a boost in energy. Like, I'm a stay-at-home dad and I'm just busy all the time.
Yeah.
And I came across this stuff at the perfect time, and it's given me the energy that I need to just be busy all the time. It's like a miracle for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I feel the same thing.
How long have you been using it?
Probably 2.5 years, I would think.
That's awesome.
And you feel, John, like just as strong as, like the response from the product is just as strong now as it was when you just started?
When I first started taking it, I was taking about 1 or 2 milliliters, and now I'll take maybe 2 to 3 milliliters.
Yeah.
And I've gone on and off. I'm not good
Yeah.
about remembering to take stuff, so there'll be some times where it'll be a couple weeks before I'll have a break and then get back on it. But it's given me a huge boost of energy. Like, I don't really feel like any diminished return from being on it from 2.5 years. It's still working like a miracle for me.
Awesome.
That's great. Well, maybe now's a good time to introduce our topic for next week. Saeid, maybe you can introduce the launch of our gold label.
Yay. So it took us, for some of you who are, who know a little bit about our history, we started in 2016. It took us a good 5 years to actually get the pine pollen varieties that are available in Canada recognized as medicine with Health Canada. And then another year to actually get an NPN for it. And because it was our first application for an NPN, we decided to apply with the highest dose that we could. So we applied for an NPN for a 1 to 4 extract of the tincture, the pollen, which is our gold label now. We're going to have it available online as of next week. So it's the first NPN natural health product number product of pine pollen in Canada, and it's going to be 50% stronger than our 1-to-6 potency. So the 1-to-6, 1 part herb to 6 parts liquid. This is going to be 1 part herb to 4 parts liquid. So when a mill of a 1-to-6 would deliver 166 milligram of the actual starting material, this gold label is going to deliver 250 milligram of the actual starting material per mil. So it goes back to the idea of potency, right? It's still a tincture. We haven't, we just took that last step of, concentration, and just instead of concentrating to a 1-to-2, we're concentrating into 1-to-1 and then adding it to the original alcoholic extract, which makes it less, in a way, water. So we are able to actually get rid of some of the water in the tincture and make it more concentrated. So super cool. We're happy about it. This is and the range we got for the dosage of that is 2 mils. What is it, Maria? Do you have the label? It's 2 to 4 mils, 2 to 3 times a day.
Okay, take 2 to 4 mils 1 to 3 times per day
1 to 2
on an
times
empty
a day.
stomach.
So yeah, so we got the lowest range, which is 2 mils once a day, all the way to 3 mils 4 times a day, which is 12 mils. So that would be for a person at 12 mils at that higher dose. That would be for a person, let's say, who's got like frank menopausal symptoms and they want to like curb it really quickly, or they have issues with erections, erectile dysfunction that is non-organic, and they want to get increased nitric oxide and increase blood flow from the impact of the pine pollen. So you can dose like 3 mils 4 times a day, and typically within as little as 2 weeks, which is 1 bottle, you're definitely going to notice an impact from that high of a dose.
And what's the difference between the powder?
The powder, the only difference between the powder is that it has both species in it, and also the tincture too. The tincture, so if you're familiar with our tinctures, we have Lodgepole and we have Ponderosa. What we did in the gold labels is we mixed them together, so they're 50-50 of each. So you're getting Lodgepole, Ponderosa in the gold label, powder or in the tincture, and the gold label powder though is 60 grams. So we dropped down the gram from 70 to 60 on that for no particular reason. Oh yeah, no, for a very particular reason. When you Ponderosa takes a little bit more space. No, for no particular reason. We dropped it down to 60. I don't know why, but it's 2.5 milligram. I just rounded it up. So 2.5 milligram is a dose. So 60 was a more round up number for usage. I guess a month worth.
We'll work on our sales pitch.
on that one, yeah, we can work on that.
Okay, John has a question. John, you want to come on?
Yes, I'd just like to make a couple of quick observations. Number one, I think you just said that you're mixing your gold is 50-50 Lodgepole and Ponderosa, and one of the previous Zoom meetings you said that the Ponderosa is feminine, divine feminine, and Lodgepole is masculine. So yeah, now you're balancing that through combining that into one product. So that's really nice. And then one other thing I wanted to add is, we're talking about energetics and how we intention, and when we're taking a supplement or a food, if we honor it and with intent, I believe that there is definitely exponential benefit, increase in benefit. But one thing about Canadian Pine Pollen Company is I know I can hear your heart is in this, and I'm thankful to have because know that this product is developed and put out by you that have such a heart into this. And, you know, that's a huge, big plus to me. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Greatest compliment we can receive. Yeah, it's true. It's a labor of love for sure. Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for joining. I'll stay on the call. We can stay on if anyone has any questions and you don't want to be on the recording. I'll stop the recording. Thank you for joining us each week on Tuesdays at 3 o'clock. And next week we will be talking more about the gold label launch of the tincture and pine pollen powder. So yeah, we'll see you next week. And thanks for joining.